The Henderson Library. An eagle's favorite spot to study, relax, or just take a nap. But did you know that you can rent movies here absolutely for free? That's what we're going to talk about on Movies at the Library. I think this might be some of my best work yet. I really like this one. All right, welcome back to another episode of Movies at the Library. I'm Chad Reese, and I'm here at the Henderson Library, here once again to talk to you guys about movies that you can rent right now absolutely for free at the Henderson Library. So in the first episode, we talked about a cheesy 80s action movie. In the last episode, we talked about the original Godzilla movie. And in this one, we're bringing up another one of my favorite movies. I love animated movies, so today we're talking about 1972 Fritz the Cat. Fritz the Cat is an animated movie from 1972, and now it's most notorious for being the first animated movie to ever receive an X rating from the Motion Pictures Association of America. Back in the 70s, the X rating didn't really mean what you might think it does now. That rating at the time was mostly just given for movies made specifically for adults, like no children should watch this, or no children would even find any kind of enjoyment or entertainment out of this. Movies like Midnight Cowboy or A Clockwork Orange all received X ratings when they first came out just because they featured such heavy themes that only adults could really find enjoyment out of something like that. Eventually, the X rating became too associated with porn that the MPAA eventually just got rid of it as a whole and replaced it with the NC-17 rating. So Fritz the Cat actually started out as a comic from 1965 written by Robert Crumb about the titular Fritz the Cat living in a super city filled with anthropomorphic animals. In the comics, Fritz the Cat is a college student who acts pretty much only to please himself. He is completely lacking in any kind of morals, ethics, or sympathy or empathy. Fritz is a huge poser and will say or do anything to pretty much anyone just so they accept him and so he can eventually take advantage of them. Sounds a whole lot like another college student I know. These original comics are all pretty raunchy. They usually involve sex or commentary on racism or just some kind of taboo subject for the time. So they all definitely were centered towards adults. So anyway, in 1972, a guy named Ralph Bakshi, who was an animator for a couple of different cartoon TV shows, most famously the 60s Spider-Man TV show, saw potential in the IP of Fritz the Cat and decided that he could make a pretty decent animated movie out of it. So he approached Robert Crumb, who was initially pretty standoffish. He had never really wanted to give away his intellectual property before, but after some talking, they eventually came to a conclusion and decided that Fritz would work really well as a feature film. Originally, even Warner Brothers agreed to fund the movie, but after Ralph Bakshi refused to tone down the sexual imagery in the movie, they pulled out. But eventually they found funding from an independent production company called Cinemation, who was very big in the exploitation and grindhouse scene at the time, and they thought it would be perfect for that. So they greenlit the project and they funded it for them. And when Cinemation found out that the MPAA was going to give the movie an X rating, they pushed that in all the marketing possible. On every poster, it says he's X-rated and animated, or something along those lines. They really wanted to push that this movie got the X rating, and it totally worked. When the movie released, it had a massive success, and to this day holds the record for the highest grossing independent animated movie of all time, grossing about $90 million at the box office. So what exactly was so bad about Fritz the Cat? Why did the MPAA want to give it an X rating? Why did they feel like this movie was totally unsuitable for any kind of children? So unlike the fictional super city from the comics, the Fritz the Cat movie takes place in Manhattan, New York in the 1960s. And this is really important because Ralph Bakshi grew up and lived in New York all his life. So it's very obvious that he's trying to pay homage to his home city. The movie begins with a protest happening in Washington State Park, and Fritz and his friends are there to take full advantage of it and use the situation to hit on some girls. So Fritz convinces the girls to come back to a party with him, and pretty quickly we can see where the writing style of this movie is going to go. Fritz and the three cats all start having sex in a bathtub, and then they start smoking some weed. Man, I really hope I'm allowed to talk about this on YouTube. The good times don't last very long though, because some cops who are portrayed as pigs show up and raid the party. Very on the nose writing there, Mr. Bakshi, and end up chasing Fritz out of the apartment and into a nearby synagogue. And before we get too farther into the plot, I just want to go ahead and mention how much I love the animation and just the art direction in general. There's lots of really great city shots, tons of interesting and unique character designs, and really cool and appealing watercolor backgrounds. It works really, really well for the tone of the movie, and I just love it. So anyway, back to the plot of the movie. Now this scene is really interesting to me, and let me explain why. So the dialogue for some of these characters is completely unscripted and was a candid recording of Ralph Bakshi's father and uncle during prayer.
I'll give you back a little bit. Oh boy, this is good for me. Mm-hmm. Can you dig it in your eyes? You're younger than me. You're 45, 48, whatever you are. I'm 67.
I wish I knew. I would give you glasses. I'll take another pair from the
Well,
house.
I didn't think of it that I need the glasses. Maar wees mijn kop. Gedenkstand niet als zoveel zaken.
There are actually a couple of different scenes like this in the movie, and I think they're really interesting. There's a scene like this at the beginning of the movie where some construction workers are talking. Apparently, Ralph Bakshi literally just walked up to some construction workers on the streets of New York, offered them $50 to have a conversation with them and record it, and put it in the movie. I think that is so cool. I love that. That is awesome. So Fritz escapes the cops and ends up going back to his dorm, where he decides that the life of academia is just not for him. His life could and should be filled with so many more interesting adventures, and all he has to do is go out there and do them. The only thing holding him back is himself. So he decides to light all of his paper and books on fire, which ends up setting his entire dorm on fire, which is pretty funny. I really love how this scene is animated, by the way. It's so cool. So after Fritz burns down his dorm, he winds up in a bar filled with a bunch of crows. And in this universe, crows represent African Americans. This bar scene is another really cool example of candid recording, and is honestly the best example of its use in the movie.
You know, damn, I just want equality. I want to be equal with the next guy because I'm paying my taxes.
Well, that's a different
No,
thing.
I'm working,
I
man,
mean,
Jack,
look,
and I'm paying my taxes.
the money is what's happening.
Hey, look,
See what I mean?
No,
See
what
what
I'm
I mean?
talking about,
It
man.
all counts. That is what's happening. I'm
No,
talking
think
about
this.
as far as like if
Think
you
this.
want to be revolutionary, you get some bread first, and then you can talk trash.
Why do you blind us with religion?
It's really obvious that Bakshi was trying to create an authentic feeling city, and you can't just capture that kind of energy with a traditional script. I really love how it turned out in this scene. It works so well. So in this bar scene, Fritz meets a crow named Duke, and after playing some pool for a little bit, they decide to go hang out somewhere else. So after only like an hour of hanging out with a crow, Fritz goes full activist mode and yells that he has to let everyone know about the revolution. The revolution is here.
Revolt! Revolt! Revolt, you thick-skulled idiots! You have carried heavy burdens for the bosses. You have sweat your lives away for the bosses. The bosses, they ride around in limousines.
Get the fuck off my car!
Bosses, they're eating strawberries and cream.
That funny cat's a real boss. All right, what's going on here?
And of course, all Fritz ends up doing is causing a big commotion that causes the cops from earlier to shoot into a crowd of crows. One of those crows that is shot is Duke. And in a really graphic and gut-wrenching scene, ends up killing him. I don't really know what all I can show of this scene because it is pretty graphic. It is really gut-wrenching, and it stuck with me for a long time after I first saw this. I absolutely love the visual metaphors of the pool balls going into holes to indicate his heart rate, slowly slowing down until eventually he dies. It's some really powerful stuff, man. And I think by now you can kind of tell why this movie might have an X rating. There's a lot of stuff going on that really only adults would want to see. With a cartoon movie like this, kids might get the idea that it's okay for them to see stuff like this and be pretty affected by it. It's heavy stuff. I don't really want to ruin the rest of the movie. There's not too many huge plot points that go on from here, but things do get kind of crazy. Fritz meets this Nazi biker bunny named Blue who has a horse girlfriend. He gets tricked into blowing up a power plant. So a lot of this stuff would probably not be too harsh in a movie nowadays, but you have to imagine that this was almost 50 years ago. Things were a lot different, and people were really not used to seeing this kind of stuff in a normal movie. So it's no question as to why it's received an X rating. I do want to talk a little bit more about Ralph Bakshi's works, because there are a couple of different things that he's done here at the library as well. The most popular movie that he did outside of Fritz the Cat was Cool World, the movie where Brad Pitt hangs out with a bunch of cartoons. It was kind of like Who Killed Roger Rabbit, but not nearly as well done. Bakshi also worked on an adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, which I really love. That movie really shows a technique that he liked to use called rotoscoping, which is basically just tracing in animated movies. You have actors act out the movie, and then you animate on top of the actors acting out the movie. And it works really, really well in the Lord of the Rings movie. I absolutely love it. My favorite movie that Ralph Bakshi made is called Wizards. It is super cool, this post-apocalyptic world where technology has been outlawed and a evil power stumbles upon old Nazi footage from 2,000 years ago and uses that to create an army that takes over the world. It's really interesting. I love that movie. And he also worked on Fire and Ice with Frank Frazetta, which is another fantastic movie. I highly recommend that one. I have so much respect for what Ralph Bakshi did during his time. He was always a rebel at heart. He never did what anybody else told him to. He always did exactly what he wanted to do because he knew what was best for the production and for his production members. Considering he started out as an animator himself, he knew that animation was not an easy gig. And he never pushed things to be perfect like a Disney movie would. So, believe it or not, there's actually also a sequel to Fritz the Cat that is also available to rent here at the Henderson Library. It's called The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat. Ralph Bakshi's not involved in this movie at all. Instead of a standard plot like the first one, this one is more of a series of short stories involving Fritz the Cat. But definitely check out the original one first. That one is so good, and it is a fantastic movie. The original is also available on Amazon Prime if you would rather watch it there. And that's basically all I wanted to talk about. I really love this movie and I really love Ralph Bakshi. Even though this movie is very raunchy and could be seen as way too over the top and maybe a little bit too try-hard, it still is so great. I love what they did. I love the boundaries they pushed. And I love the final piece and how it all came together. And once again, you can rent this movie absolutely for free at the Henderson Library if you have your Eagle ID card. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.